right. We're up on Substack. Now if I could just get Insta to work. Okay, fingers crossed. I don't know what its problem's been lately. Working on it. We'll be up in just a second. Hit that like, everybody. Annoy the maggot in your life. Oops. Instagram's still being a big jerk. Why is that? All right. One more try, and then Instagram's on its own. We shall see. All right. 3, 2... Oh, whoa. All right. Let's go to hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Good morning. What's happening? Does the fade button work? No, it does. It just some days the buttons work, some days they don't, and nobody quite knows why or what for. And hello, good morning, good day to you. It's Hal Sparks Mornings, Megaworldwide. Philip Bittner will be joining us in the second hour, and right now it's just the two of us. Let's see, I can open up the Discord so I can make sure that I can see everything. Everybody knows there's a Discord available to our Patreon folks, and there's a regular Hal Sparks Discord as well that's less exclusive, and you might as well use it. If you use Discord, it's a good time. Ask Andrea about it. There we go. Strange new label on your... Okay, I don't know what that is. And then we'll bring this up, and the votingages are happening currently in the House over the Senate bill, which violates all the rules of the there are enough changes in it that you can't just pass it. They have to run it through committee again. The question is, under normal circumstances, they would have to do this. At this point, all stuff's, like, everything is off the table. The idea that anything will run normally is ridiculous. Okay, couple of things in the news right away. Sean P. Diddy Combs was found guilty of 2 of the 5 charges against him, mainly the transporting people for the purposes of prostitution, which are, I mean, to say they're lesser charges compared to, like, sex trafficking through violence, fraud, or coercion is an understatement. And yeah, here's how I feel about it. Even if you paid someone and they were willing participants in a sexual act, which again, I subscribe to the Carlin idea. If selling is legal and fucking is legal, why isn't selling fucking legal? If people want to do that for themselves, or have other people do that to them, whatever the process is, I feel like that should be legal, just safe and protected, and people shouldn't be exploited. All right. So, but no matter what the arrangement was at the beginning of the circumstance, here's this amount of money, put on the chicken suit, hit me with a rolled up newspaper while I masturbate into a waste paper basket that I stole from my old job. I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum. This is just something I read on the internet. And in the middle of that, that person says, fuck you, I don't want to do this anymore, and they run out of the place. Once you start kicking their ass and dragging them back into the space, the previous arrangement, no matter what it is off the table. Yes, I believe it was a win for Diddy in that regard as well. But that's how I feel about it. Because I happen to think you can rape a spouse or an intimate partner, that just because you're in for a penny doesn't mean you're in for a pounding, and that anybody has the right to tap out in a sexual circumstance no matter what their previous agreement was. And it's pretty easy to bail on it. Especially, and this is the weird part, especially if you are a billionaire. Right? If you have all the options, the sexual and personal gratification options available to you all the time, then you have no excuse. You have even less excuse than somebody who's like, this is the only person that's ever going to fuck me, and if they leave, I'll never have sex again. Like, they're not even in that scale of like some trailer park asshole who murders his wife, or the wife murders her husband because, nobody's going to be interested if they take a powder, right? Yeah. No means no. Yeah, it's not that difficult. And you're welcome to tap out in the middle of it. If that's what you want to, how, as a guy, say what you think about other guys that force it, that it's rape, that they're not real men, that it should be, the idea of having sex with you should be enough to keep them there. If the act itself is less than pleasing, love should step in and pick up the slack. But controlling someone through force, fraud, or coercion into doing that is rape, no matter what you call it. That's what I would say. There was a, oh yeah. So I watched how many people have watched the Patty Hearst documentary? Have you guys, I'm sure many of you know the Patty Hearst story. There's a documentary on, I believe, Netflix right now. But it's like a 5 episode series on what happened to Patty Hearst. And, there was a bunch of back and forth about whether or not she was a willing participant or how quickly she was turned and all this stuff. And if you look at it, it is abundantly clear that as an 18-year-old girl who was abducted, who knew none of her abductors, her kidnappers beforehand, and was basically over the course of months told that her parents weren't going to save her and all this kind of stuff. She was beaten. And then at one point, one of the guys says, the guys that they interview, one of the 3 that are still alive, that weren't killed in the house in Compton. My favorite part of the story, I think, is where before the shootout happened, there was a man and his daughter who were, I think the man was sympathetic to the SLA, the Symbionese Liberation Army, and he had his little girl in there. They both ran out once the shooting started because these people opened fire on everybody. And the guy, they asked the guy what happened. He goes, nope, there's just one old black lady in there. And there obviously weren't. And they asked the little girl, and she said, there's a bunch of white people in there with guns. That was her response. And they're like, okay, we've got the right house. It's Compton. We've got the right house. So the Symbionese Liberation Army held up in this one house, and then there were 3 of them that weren't there. A man, a woman, and Patty Hearst. And they were going for stuff. And then they were on the run for a while until they managed to, form a smaller clique or whatever. But it's like almost 2 years that this was happening, right? But she started out as an 18-year-old going to college and all this kind of stuff. She was abducted, and it was a real talk about how you could coerce and through violence convince someone that they, just to go against everything they believe. But at one point, one of the guys says, he or somebody asked her, if there was somebody in this house you'd want to have sex with, who would it be? And she allegedly said this guy who goes by the nickname Cujo. And then they all had a little meeting about it, and then the Cujo guy went in there and was like being nice to her, and then they had sex. And this guy's like, it was all consensual. And beyond being just disgusted by even the soft talk around this, let me be abundantly clear. If somebody can't leave, it's rape. Even if you've talked them into, this is the only pleasure you're going to get before we kill you, so you might as well do it because, it's like we're all on a crashing plane. Fuck you. Fuck you. And the dude who is interviewed in this, who just is sitting there like, she was never raped. This was all consensual. She had sex with this guy, and she had sex with this guy in the house while she was there. Like, motherfucker, she couldn't leave. And she thought she was going to die. That's rape. Sorry. It's only not if she has a choice of anybody in the world. She can leave freely, but there's the door. No harm, no foul in every circumstance that she chooses to stay with you. That's it. But like this dude, he was like laughing about it. And I was like, I was infuriated by this because he was just like shrugging it off. And again, when this happens, she's 18 years old, snatched from her boyfriend and her house. They're engaged, her fiance. He's beaten over the head with a fucking wine bottle till he's bleeding from his eye, and like the left side of his face is basically caved in. They threw the guy, they threw her over his shoulder and ran off. He thought he was running to get help because it was just a robbery. Came back and she's gone. And then 56 days they keep her in a fucking closet. It's rape. That's rape. Sorry. Not sorry. It's rape. Misogyny runs very deep. Well, Catherine, it just so happens that the Symbionese Liberation Army, the people, the Marxist revolutionaries that snatched her up, were predominantly female. There were more female members of the Symbionese Liberation Army than there were males. There was a lesbian couple, but then there were the rest were heterosexual or bisexual women, and there were always more women in that group than there were men. Say what you will about the control of the men or whatever, but they were very, how do you phrase this? All these women viewed themselves as feminists. Okay, and Symbionese, where's symbiote? Okay, Symbionese it came from the idea of symbiotic, that there was a symbiotic relationship between students and prisoners. There was a movement in Berkeley. The Symbionese Liberation Army name comes from the fact that there was this movement at Berkeley to kind of reach out, like Marxist revolutionaries on Berkeley campus started reaching out to prisoners, and because they figured, I guess it was a penned audience that they could get or whatever, but they would be able to find people to join their movement because they were victims of the man, and they would kind of, I don't know. It's like their own soft-pedaled version of Helter Skelter. We'll get the black people out of jail, and they'll join the feminist Marxist movement, and we believe in violent revolution. And so that's where that shit started. And the leader of it was this black prisoner who was friends with a bunch of them, and that dude came up with the term Symbionese because it was symbiotic between students and prisoners. And that there was there's a similarity. And by the way, does this sound familiar to anybody? Does this kind of language that people who find themselves in jail because they are serial rapists, and people who have to work a job for a wage are slaves, and therefore white upper class Berkeley kids who can wear the scarf of whatever cause are in the same boat as black people in jail who are, even if that particular one was a rapist, are in jail because there's more black people in jail than there are white people statistically, that this particular rapist must be innocent on some level. And that those two groups working together in this kind of like defund the police, eliminate the prisons, upend the system, right? All these fuckers, everything's a fucking reboot, right? House Dems are really annoying maggots today. They're going to be all day because they know it's breaking the rule. By the way, I'll show you some of that right now. We'll discuss the big beautiful bill. But I wanted to say that about the Diddy thing because I want to be really clear. In my opinion, if you how a prison doesn't need bars, huh? If it doesn't have bars, it's not a prison. Of course it does. Uh-huh. And again, if we see the idea that there aren't a bunch of people I don't even know why some people complain about Trump's rape charges if they don't believe there should be a prison for people like that to be put in. If you don't believe we should have incarceration or mass incarceration or whatever, either mean we have to kill off people instead of keeping them in jail for a long time, or you think people who sexually assault children should be asked, should get out after 3 years or something. I mean, make that case if you believe it. I don't. Right? Seriously. Anyways, quit calling it that. It is a BS bill. Yes, the budget busting bill. They mean psychological manipulation being a prison. Oh, I see. Well, in the case of Patty Hearst, ironically, that it's an interesting case because the very same people who are saying we should abolish physical prisons created the mental prison you're talking about on Patty Hearst. Took an 18-year-old girl, blindfolded her for more than 2 months. Blindfolded her, kept her in a closet for 2 fucking months. Ended up sexually assaulting her, and then created that mental prison around. It's like when they trick somebody who's a victim into staying because they're like, if you try to leave, I'll kill your family. That, a lot of the manipulators use that kind of language. That would be an example of a mental prison in that regard, right? Damn, I thought I may have had you back to the drawing board. Yeah, no, sorry. Private sector lost 33,000 jobs in June. Oh yeah, this again, part of the reason why Trump is claiming that the economy's doing well and there's a lot of purchasing going on is because he keeps punting these tariffs and people are buying extra shit, knowing that at some point these tariffs are going to have to kick in or he's going to have to surrender. They don't believe he's going to surrender, so he's going to fuck up the system. So the first part of the year, stores have been buying stuff early, stacking shit so that they can get ahead of the tariffs. Hal, invite Congresswoman Slotkin onto your Friday AI show. I would love to do that, Kim. Absolutely. If you're a Republican at this point, you're complicit in everything they do. I would argue, yeah. Even if you're soft pedaling it, especially now. Thank you very much, Water Goddess. I gotta tell you, that I started watching that Patty Hearst thing late at night because I didn't know how many episodes it was, and I ended up staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, because I needed to watch to the end because I was familiar with a lot of it, but from a historical standpoint, there was a lot of it details that I didn't know, and the interviews, like I said, with the members of it that were part of it, they were like, she stayed. I don't know I don't know what they're even saying. She was we captured her. She learned really quickly. And, you're like, dude, she was 18. You raped her. You starved her. You kept her in a closet. You told her parents weren't going to, weren't going to pay the ransom and were part of the system that was going to not only kill poor people, but leave her to die and leave her to you. That's what I thought really, and this fits the kind of Diddy thing, was I don't think the people that were in that group, in the, the Symbionese Liberation Army fuckers, I don't think they grasped that part of the reason why she may have snapped against her parents was that her parents would be willing to leave me with you. They were not only they were making her recite all this Marxist propaganda back to them and repeat these things, like she was in a fucking re-education camp, but they were, physically and psychologically torturing her. And to her parents were like willing to leave her in their grasp. Yeah, who was doing this? Diddy and his gang? No, I'm talking about Patty Hearst and them. But when it comes to somebody like Cassie Ventura, my rule is, and I stand by this, that if somebody is paying somebody to have sex in a hotel room and they're just into all kinds of crazy shit, none of my fucking business. But if any of the people in there try to leave and any other people in there go out and beat them up and drag them by their hair back into the room, every arrangement before that moment is null and void. Because all of us, I think, enter into relationships with the idea that that is the unwritten part of it, that if any part of this crosses a line for me, I can leave. That is part of the unwritten rule of being in a relationship or a financial arrangement or whatever with somebody else. That if it crosses a line, I'm allowed to go. I can pack my shit. And if I'm under contract for a job, right? If there's a job I have and they're like, hey, you have to work this until this contract is over, but they cross a line with me and I want to break that contract, I can either make the case that they violated the contract by pushing me beyond a limit that is maybe not addressed in the contract or something that I don't want to do anymore, and it's doing harm to me that didn't exist in the first place. And if the court says, nope, you got to pay back all the money, that's part of the agreement as well. So, okay, tough shit, but I still get to go. You can't make me do it. You might be able to make me give the money back. You might be able to, charge me money for them hiring somebody else to do it, but you can't make me stay and carry it out. That's slavery. Fuck you. End of story. And so in the case of Cassie Ventura, I don't give a shit what she agreed to up to the point where she left that room with her sunglasses on, with her bag in her hand, and that motherfucker came out and kicked her in the head. And everything after that, everything after the violence is coercion. Everything. Even if she was playing nice on red carpets, all that kind of stuff. After the beating, and also, I'm not even assuming that's the first beating, right? That's silly. But because it's on film, there's no excuse. Anything that happens between Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura after that hotel tape where he's beating her up and dragging her back to the room, everything after that is coercion. Because he's already shown her he is not afraid to harm her in public. And that's one of the things, like there's a real distinction between some of the people who like engage in domestic violence at home, but nobody sees it. They cover it up. And so there's maybe a belief system in some people, maybe even both parties in a relationship, that it only happens at home and I'm going to be okay. And he just gets mad or she just gets drunk and blah, 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 right? Maybe that's a thing. But once somebody slaps you in public or strikes you in public or in front of other people that are either employees or people that, friends of theirs, your life's in danger. Somebody's saying, like, have Hell, if you suffer indignities to keep a luxury lifestyle, what does that say about her? Fancy place or not, I would not put up with that violence. Connie, a lot of people say that, but it is, if there's no way out or it's so dangerous, right? No, I think I think that's, and I don't blame Connie for asking this question. I get where people get that, but the degree of whatever your life is, maybe her wealth and her privilege at that point, if you want to call it that, is how she also pays for her whole fucking family. Oftentimes, poor people get stuck in these situations because they got nowhere else to go. There's also a thing when people reach a certain level of success and the rest of their family has no success, where they're the only thing that their entire family relies on them. Does that make sense? So it isn't just that she would lose her career, but she takes care of a bunch of other people. She's, you've got assistants and employees and agents and all this stuff, and their whole careers, and that pressure is there on some people. The point is, I don't care if he's beating her. It isn't even about the luxury of it anymore. This isn't even about the quality of life. It's about life at all. Because if somebody will beat you in public, they'll fucking kill you in that situation. Does that make sense? And it becomes less about the degrees of comfort in your life to life at all. So no. And I am also, by the way, I do not subscribe to the, I had an affair with him and he was a man of power and I was, it's intoxicating when a man of power reaches out to a woman who doesn't have as much power, and therefore I felt like I got involved with like the Monica Lewinsky kind of story that people talk about, because it takes women's agency away in those situations. But once violence enters into it, their agency is completely gone, especially if that person has money and power. Hal, I'm sorry you always had your family to fall back on. Some of us don't, hard to judge. No, I did not. I mean, emotionally maybe, but not financially. I mean, that's again, that's why I was ice skating uphill doing scrap jobs for a decade in the 90s, because I didn't. Does this make sense? Yeah, and so here's the thing. Once the violence starts, there is an order of magnitude of difference between whether somebody's staying in a relationship that, they're putting up with certain things or whatever. That is the agency of a human being. That is a man or a woman who's an adult past the age of 18. That's their ass. That's just what you deal with. But once somebody snatches you by the hair, kicks you in the neck and the chest, and punches you and drags you back into a room, that sets up an understanding between you and that person, especially if they have a lot of money and they've allegedly gotten rid of other people, or they've not been afraid to fucking shoot a gun in a club. That's wholly different, right? And I feel like when we mix those things, we let down the victims of violence by watering it down. Was there ever a no? Yes. Here's the no. You walk out the door with an intention of leaving, that's a no. If you have to drag her back into the room, she is saying no even if she never opens her mouth. If she's just screaming, that's a no. It's a no. Right. So fuck this dude and fuck his music and fuck any of his fans and it's gross. I don't know how much, or if any, time he's going to do for the charges he's been found guilty of, and I don't know if the thing he will face next will be the civil charges around this, which will more than likely be the things that will do the most damage. But it's by my estimation, it's wrong, and it's gross, and everything, no matter what she agreed to, no matter what she was comfortable with, or what you see as her being comfortable with, up to the point where he beats her and drags her back into the room, is immaterial going forward. People can sign on to all kinds of shit. People can be comfortable with all, their levels. I have this joke in my act about how, I was talking about it on the Flapper show that I've been kind of working a piece out about how pervy safe words are, and if you want to go back and watch that, feel free. That there is a, how do I word this without giving away the joke? I don't know. That's the hard part. That basically everybody in their life likes a little they just don't want it to cross into oh no. Uh-oh is fine, oh no is bad. And so there is a point where if you like a little uh-oh, it can cross over into oh no. And that's an important distinction. Right? Everybody's allowed to have a little bit of uh-oh, what are you up to? Uh-oh, oh no. Oh no is when is the difference, right? Is that's the line. And if that line is crossed by either partner, it doesn't fucking matter. You're still crossing that line. And by the way, people who've been in relationships with people who have this, like have an edge that's further along than other people's lines. It exists all the time. And they get used to it. They expect it from the people in their lives. And so if you're around somebody like that, you have to tell them more directly. This happens with famous people a lot. And I would argue that Louis C.K., one of the big things, and he did a bunch of gross shit. One of the things he did was he had two comics, this comedy duo or writing team, these girls that came up to his hotel room after a show, and he took his dick out and started playing with himself, and he asked them to do it, and they laughed because they thought he was kidding, and then he started doing it, and then they wanted to leave, and it was gross, and they felt manipulated and stuff, which I understand. But the part of it that is kind of missing from that is clearly the night before or 2 nights, the last time 2 women went up to his room, he had sex with them. So in his mind, this is just how it works. And clear lines were not defined in that situation. Now, once they go, all right, asshole, we're done. The fact that he tries to manipulate them after that fact is worse. It's worse than the mistake. It's worse than assuming that they might have been up for it. I would argue there's almost nothing wrong with assuming somebody might be up for it if you're reading signs and thinking somebody's flirting and that kind of stuff. But once they tap out, whether verbally, morally, there's the signs they're giving you shift, and you got to pay attention to that. You have a responsibility to make sure that they know this was a miscommunication. You're totally safe and fine. I misread what you were doing, and you can charmingly back away from it. The problem is that by the time that happens in most situations, or you even hear about it, it has dialed down, it is shrunk down to the worst of the worst. This is like the thing about like the Snowden plans. The reason you heard about stuff that Snowden let out that was like, oh my God, they're going to be tracking all these. They have this plan to create software that will track all this shit. Okay, the reason you heard about that is because that's the stuff that gets leaked because the people who are guarding it, know it's not going to be used that much, or there's already, in the case of the Snowden stuff, there's always a commercial version of it anyways, right? So it was just kind of stupid, waste of time. So the people were loose-lipped about it in a way that they wouldn't be about really serious things. So you only hear about the inserious, overreaching shit. The same thing is sort of true about these kind of interactions. There are most interactions that happen in that window of consent where you're like, there was miscommunication or people are moving back and forth and whatever, finding their own lines, because people are allowed to do that too with themselves. Your consent line can be like, all right, I wasn't okay with this, but I kind of am now. Or, you're allowed to figure out whether you want to, be a part of this or not. And that might shift, right? Let's see, hold on one second. This is the, I'm checking on the vote. Let's see. House Republicans Wednesday. Speaker Mike Johnson sought to unite his fractious Congress behind the legislature to slash tax. Okay, blah. Are we currently? Let's see. This is the last 8 minutes ago. Representative first one appears to be making some progress with her Republican colleagues on the floor just now. Steve Womack introduced her at the microphone. Said the gentlelady from Delaware. Second time this year that they've actually referred to her as a woman. That's very nice. Congressional Black Caucus were on the floor trying to force amendments to the legislation. Okay. We shall see what we shall see. But, I mean, I think this is an important part of this because I don't think we should have to have a paint by numbers sexuality where everybody has to like fill out a contract for intimacy every time they engage. We should be able to read each other's signs and only, by the way, move to the next stage of our physical intimacy after there's a level of trust built that shouldn't necessarily be built on alcohol, right? But if there's ever any question, or that's a thing, I've started been thinking in terms of these things for this bit that I've been working on that we used to need a safe word to get out of sex. Now we need one to get in. Like everybody should have a safe word that somebody could just come up and say your safe word, and that means they're up for it. Like you announce your safe word, and if they want to have sex with you, you're just like, my sexual safe word is pineapple chunks. If you come up and if I'm flirting with you and you go, hey, by the way, pineapple chunks, they're like, oh, all right, okay, well then we're both down. Like it's that notarize the consent. Well, that's sexy. What are you okay on? All right, this is my 1 finger fine, 2 fingers reasonable, 5 fingers is professional. Nope, we need a union contract for that, right? How do you think the House will pass the absolutely asinine abomination to appease Felon 47? I think it seems like there's enough votes to push back against this on the Republican side. We shall let me check in and see if they have it live in here. Yeah, okay, whatever. Go back. Go away. Anyway, get out of here. Play. New. Go.
For the majority, 7 for the minority.
Will reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina.
Okay, so this is what's happening currently.
I give 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Fine.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I sat here and listened to that panoply of speeches or motions over the last few seconds, I was reminded of the fact that when we say there should be no cuts to Medicaid, we are saying there should be no cuts to illegal immigrants that are getting Medicaid. Now, we live in a world where we spend more money than we bring in, and it is not fair to actual Americans to be forced to...
The Senate put back in a provision that was in the House that stopped illegal immigrants from getting Medicaid. The House took that out, made it so that they could take it away from immigrants, and the Senate put it back in. And so one of the major changes was that shuffle around. And so there's a bunch of House conservatives who think that's one of the spending things they wanted to cut and was primary to this argument. So
Medicaid statute, but undocumented immigrants are not entitled to receive Medicaid benefits, and they don't. And our solution to make sure that our children are not saddled with debt is to not give billionaires and millionaires and corporations big tax cuts. Jeff Bezos doesn't need a tax cut. And why don't you come down here and explain to people why it's so important that you protect his tax cuts? We tried to go after the billionaire tax cuts in the Rules Committee last night, and every single Republican voted no. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to invest in people who need help. We're going to make sure people have health care. We're going to make sure people have food assistance. We're not going to screw them over. Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. DeSagne.
Is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Massachusetts for yielding. This bill would cause household resources for the poorest Americans to decrease
He's in the 10th
while the
district.
extremely rich will get richer. I offered 2 amendments that rules, one to prevent people with disabilities from being kicked off Medicaid and one to help low-income students afford an education that they earn.
Clearly madness.
Unfortunately, Republicans refuse to consider them as they yet again work through the dead of night to rip off hardworking Americans and give tax breaks to the richest Americans who don't need them.
Hold on.
And even
hold on. 250K Home says because politicians are paid for by the rich. 250K Home, you do realize that both of the Democrats you just saw right there, who are trying to save Medicare, make sure that people with disabilities are taken care of, they're politicians. The Democrats who are trying to stop this bill are politicians too. They're actively doing everything they can to slow this process down or stop it. And they are politicians. And I feel like this is when our language fails us. If we become habitual in our phrasing, this would be similar to like the ACAB idea. My disabled cousin just had heart surgery paid for by Medicaid, as they should, Ed, and that's a good thing. And Democrats are fighting to make sure that's still there, but and still available to people like your cousin who's in that situation. Meanwhile, Republicans don't believe it should be there, want it stripped, and want to eliminate it for. I mean, granted, it depends on the state. I'm sure they're completely fine with Medicaid under the table for their constituents. What's the 10th? Let's take a look. 10th district in California. Okay, it is. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, so it's outside San Francisco, kind of Walnut Creek, sort of the rural area east of Berkeley. That would be this area. It's a fairly big area. Also, pretty well-to-do as far as money. At least Concord, Pleasant Hill, and Walnut Creek are pretty well-to-do. So, ACAB is all cops are bastards is a phrase that you'll hear from people who are like anti-cop on the left. They'll throw this ACAB around, which I mean, unless you're willing to say it while they're burying a female police officer who was killed at a traffic stop trying to keep, some dude from running off with a 12-year-old he snatched, I'd say fuck off. Like, stand up for it if you're really going to say that. All. And again, it's the inclusion of the word all that is the problem. That's where, that's the issue I have. And maybe that's just me being a Libra. But, if you have, hold on one second.
News.
So they're going to play this forward. I'm just going to move this forward, and they're jumping back and forth. This is a Democrat in New York. And so Democrats are talking about trying to, they're trying to stop this bill. We do not have the votes on our own to come up with our own bill. The Republicans have a limited margin to pass this thing. And yeah. Yeah, very wealthy, also compassionate and humane. That's true. Siobhan Lane, that entire area is most, nope. Even most doesn't work. Scab might work. Some cops are bastards, sure. That's true of everybody. I'm fine with that. Most is ridiculous. Did she turn in other dirty cops? All right. You're assuming that they are that she has access to them, like they're all like that. Again, that's what that belief system bleeds into, and it also makes people, I think, it creates a situation where people become exhausted or lethargic about things because they assume the negative in a bunch of people, and they pay no attention to, they end up with confirmation bias about large groups of people, which is always wrong. Sarah McBride is speaking.
Last several months, I've met with hundreds of Delawareans, parents, patients, providers, hospital leaders, teachers, nurses, people across the state of Delaware, everyone asking us, pleading with us to kill this bill. Are my Republican colleagues meeting with their constituents? Are they ignoring them?
No. Yes,
Do
they
they
are.
even care? Every yes vote shows very clearly that they don't. This bill is trickle-down cruelty, and people will die because of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the President has said numerous times, there'll be no cuts to Medicaid. The One Big Beautiful Bill protects
That's just a lie.
and strengthens Medicaid for those who rely on it. Pregnant women, children, seniors, people with disabilities, and low-income families, while eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. The One Big Beautiful Bill removes illegal aliens, enforces work requirements, and protects Medicaid for the truly vulnerable.
It enforces work requirements. That would be the thing, especially for people with disabilities, right? That unless you can see that somebody's missing a limb, they're not really disabled. That's a huge chunk of this, by the way, and it's the thing that will affect the most people.
And for our colleagues on the other side who say illegal aliens are not receiving this, we understand that 1.4 million people do not meet citizenship and immigration status requirements for Medicaid enrollment, but would be covered under current law in programs funded by the states. And we know that because we have a CBO score. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, by the way, that would be the rollover of people who are temporarily in custody and the like. So we use Medicaid funding for those folks. They don't just live here on it for a while without having legal status, because they would eventually get legal status during that period of time. They also if you passed the border bill that the Democrats and conservative Republicans had put forward under Joe Biden, that time under which they would receive those benefits or be moved off of it or allowed to work, all that kind of stuff, would have shortened. Just fucking awful. My boyfriend is missing a limb, and he was kicked off Medicaid already and denied disability. Good Lord, Aaron, I'm sorry. That's the layoff work requirements mean nothing, especially if you're over 50. Yeah, that's a good point, Connie. If you make work requirements for everyone, but there's no work to be had. And again, what's Trump going to do? Bring in one of these fucking vending machine factories and go work in the factory if you want Medicaid. Sorry, if you can't do your job properly or effectively, that is being bad at your job. Cops are bad at their job, therefore I can't. No, Kenny. They are not. I will not be bigoted towards large groups of people because of the actions of a few of them. Sorry. Being a Democrat, being a liberal means more to me than that. Yes, California does take care of their people. That's why, the blue states also have secondary systems and better charity structures and the like. And in the case of, say, New York, they jettison people who create charities and then scam people with them, like the Trumps. What does it say on the Statue of Liberty? And the Republicans call themselves patriots. Yeah, they never believed that. 80% work already because they have to. I agree, Frida. That's the thing. This is a lot of like the welfare queen language that we saw under Reagan. It's the same shit. Again, everything's a fucking reboot. They're going to keep doing this for the time being. Hold on. That's the Senate session. Back here. Hold on one second. Get back in here, you silly. You silly.
Too bad. Hospitals shut down. Good luck. Can't afford groceries or figure it out. But if you're a big oil, a CEO, or a trust fund baby, don't worry. we've got you covered. This bill is about who matters and who doesn't. And guess what? Working people didn't make the cut. But I want my Republican colleagues to know they don't have to do this. They don't have to sell out their own communities. They don't have to vote for a bill that goes against fundamental things they claim to believe in. Crazy as it sounds, they don't have to hurt people to keep Trump happy. Find a spine. Find a conscience, for God's sake, because the American people are watching. They know the difference between real leadership and bootlicking. A vote for this bill is a vote for cruelty. It's a vote for fiscal irresponsibility and a vote to screw over your constituents to give more to the ultra-wealthy. This bill is a middle finger to working people.
I agree. Can I add something that I think every Democrat should be saying is that, and I like the messaging around trickle-down cruelty. I think they're absolutely right on these fronts, but they should they should add on top, and it adds to the debt and the deficit, and it violates your fiscal conservative bona fides, and it makes you a liar to your constituents. You said you were going to get rid of that waste, fraud, and abuse, and getting rid of that would be enough to cut the deficit by $1 trillion, and it wasn't. You're adding to the debt. Not only are you being cruel, but you're not even doing it for the purpose you said you were, which was, well, you got to be cruel to be kind, right? Add that on top of it. Go, not only is this cruel, it doesn't actually help us with the debt or the deficit. It's cruelty for cruelty's sake. You can't even go home and say, yeah, there's a lot of people in our district that are vulnerable, that are going to be really harmed, but we solved the debt problem. We fixed this part of it, because it doesn't. It actually makes it worse. It gives Donald Trump more of a slush fund to run away with and spend on whatever he wants. And leaves more debt, because that's what they're going to hear. I got to tell you, like, she doesn't give a rat fuck if you bring up that poor people or immigrants or anything are going to be harmed. I mean, it's like Charlie Brown's teacher when you bring that shit up. Just rah, 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 rah. They're not hearing it. But if you say, not only is this cruel and unchristian-like behavior, but it also adds to the debt, adds to the deficit, then their ears perk up. That's got to be a part of it. Like, every time you bring up how cruel and gross, it's going to shut down rural hospitals, and it's not even going to lower the debt. It's going to shut down VA services, and it's not even going to help us with the debt or the deficit. It's not going to cut the deficit in any meaningful way at all. Right? Add that on top of all of it. Make that case, and on top of that, use the language they hear, or at least pretend to give a shit about, because then that tape haunts them when they go back to their own districts. And that's why you have people like this dipshit. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chip Roy promising a storm if this passes. Journalist highlighted the comment by, he goes, where's the late night post-storm, or is it before the storm? Roy wrote with along with a photo of the Capitol. Roy with an ominous late night tweet. The Texas Republican voted no in the rules last night. He has flipped a lot in this Congress, but many in this world feel that that the string is running out and promises have not been kept. An interesting few days or more ahead, meaning that they're expecting this dude and a bunch of people like him to not vote for this thing. And it ain't because they're worried about rural hospitals being shut down or people being harmed. Chip Roy didn't suddenly become a nice guy. He doesn't care about the cruelty of this thing. The only thing, what makes it difficult for him is that the cruelty also doesn't have some sort of fiscal reason he can go back to his constituents and say, I cut the deficit. I cut the debt. Fuck him. It's, you're not going to convince this asshole, right? But you can pull the pin in the grenade he's carrying around politically. Because he's the one that's making the case. He's the one that sold to his constituency that he would do this. That he would cut the deficit. He would cut the debt. There's Phil in the background joining us in just one moment. Chip Roy doesn't give a rat's ass about the cruelty inherent in this system or in the bill. He just wanted it to come with $1 trillion worth of cuts, and it didn't happen. It's not going to happen. And so these guys either have to, push back against Trump and vote against this, send this back to the Senate for yet another round of back and forth, or he's got to turn himself into a giant liar in front of everyone, and there will be this battle between, he's going to get primaried by Elon Musk, which, by the way, that feud has heated up as well. By the way, hit the like, share the show. I'm about to bring in our dear friend Philip Bittner. Let me see if it, let me pop you in here real quick, see if this, everything should work. There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, Philip Bittner joining us. Hold on, I got to put you in here. There you go. Welcome to the show. How are you? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll turn on my virtual camera. Boink. There we go. There we go.
There we go.
So, good morning. How are you?
Evening.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I mean, new rule. Can't ask me how I'm doing. You know why?
Yeah.
Because it sucks.
Yes. All right.
It sucks.
All right.
On a constant daily measure. It sucks. Especially with this news about we're not going to get any more air defense.
Mm-hmm. So
a lot of people are going to die. Myself potentially included. This decision to suspend, air support and artillery support to Ukraine is going to mean a lot more Ukrainians are going to die. Mm-hmm. But what have I always said, Hal? What have I always said since we started talking way back when? We don't get to decide when the Ukrainians stop fighting.
Right.
We have to decide how much we want to supply them with support so that more of them don't have to die before the goal is achieved. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to give up. No. So now we're at a point where we made promises, and I'm not talking about the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. I'm talking way back. I'm talking about the Budapest Memorandum.
Right.
We're talking about 1994. We said if you give up your nukes, we'll protect your territory. Mm-hmm. And we're not doing it. We are not going to do it.
Right.
So Ukrainians are going to remember, many Ukrainians are going to remember that we gave support. Many more Ukrainians are going to recognize the betrayal. Mm-hmm. And that's happening now. And lots of folks are about to die. And we are going to sit on the sidelines knowing that our inaction is a decision that means people are going to die.
Yeah. And
that's how I'm doing.
Hashtag thanks uncommitted. The whole genocide Joe crowd pretending that that it was a coin flip between Trump and Biden, Trump and Harris. What's the difference?
Would have been the same.
Would have been the exact same. That's the story that they're gonna sell across the board. And I gotta say, there is at a certain point, watching the people sort of react to this and talk about the inevitability of it, or the broad language that they're talking about as far as both sides would have done it, and politicians are this way, and America does this or whatever, as if it doesn't matter who's in charge when it abso-fucking-lutely does. And that's the part that aggravates me in all this, is that the fallback seems to be. Go ahead. Sorry. Say again.
I go to the sleep of the sound of air raid sirens. Of course it matters.
Yeah.
It matters.
Yeah. Yep. So this is New York Times wrote on here. Hold on. Let me bring this in.
I'm sorry to be dramatic about it, but I'm really pissed off.
Of course.
I'm really pissed off.
Many more people will die. U.S. withdraws from war in Ukraine, New York Times. Ukraine will probably survive without American aid, but at a much greater cost. It remains debatable how much the suspension of American aid will affect Ukraine, but one thing is already becoming clear. The United States is removing itself from the Russian-Ukrainian war. This is reported by the New York Times. As the author of the publication notes, in March, the White House had already suspended all military aid to Ukraine for about a week, that was the stuff from the CR that was left over that Hegseth pulled, and then they had to turn it back on. Which is one of the consequences of a public quarrel between. Since then, the administration has only added reasons to believe that the U.S. is no longer friendly to Ukraine. Ukraine is no longer a priority, no longer at the center of U.S. foreign policy. At least Trump is very honest about this with the Ukrainians. This is from the Ukrainian side. Today, the armed forces of Ukraine are armed with 8 Patriot anti-aircraft missile systems, 6 of which are used to defend Kyiv. Without any new supplies of anti-aircraft missiles, it will be much more difficult for Ukraine to defend the capital. This is a huge problem. Trump. I mean, it's hard to tell what the fuck. Like, Trump lives under this bizarre. I mean, he also raised some sanctions on some Russian banks. On
and arms dealers.
Yeah,
he's going to let them sell arms
because that's Iran, right? That's the back and forth. That's his deal with Iran. That's why the illusion that, well, we bombed their nuclear system, and if they have a regular system, it's totally fine. That's because he's benefiting the military industrial complex of the entire rest of the fucking world. It is one thing to like buck the MIC in the United States and go, we are controlled, our policies are controlled by the military industrial complex in the United States, as if there's not a military industrial complex in other big countries with enormous militaries, like China, for example, where, when Xi Jinping steps down, which is probably going to be sometime in the next 3 to 6 months, the guy who steps in is going to be the leader of the military. He's going to be their military industrial complex leader. And then Vladimir Putin is a former KGB agent who is completely tied in with gas as a control point for the military expansion of the country, is the military industrial complex of Russia. Never mind the Saudis and their sales point for arms in the Middle East and the like, and the bouncer on that. They have a military industrial complex as well, largely very, very forward-looking, very cyber, right? So I think one of the problems with the conversation about the military industrial complex is the illusion that it only exists in the United States. While we have to pay attention to what ours is doing and the control that they might have over our politicians, we also can't forget that they actually still have that in every other country, especially Russia, which is, I would argue, that's all Russia is right now. That their banks only exist for that purpose.
Yeah. Well, they're on a war economy footing.
Right.
So, yeah, obviously. And it's just the betrayal. There's no other word for it. The betrayal of what they are announcing, no more 155 millimeter shells, no more Patriot missile, defense systems. People are going to die here. Going to die. Yeah. That is the decision.
And when it comes to Trump, feature not a bug. The other thing I want to say is that, like, there is this isolationist idea that we shouldn't be in these foreign wars. This is the thing that's floating around, what they're calling now the woke right, which are the people who are like attacking Israel and the like, but they also, it applies to Ukraine and others. I notice it applies largely to anywhere where Jews are in charge or black people's lives are in danger. This is where they're like, we get out of here, right? It doesn't mean that we don't make sure that Russia doesn't have more control over this situation than they should. We allow that imbalance to continue because it's obvious which side they're on in that regard. But Trump and his and that woke right, chorus that's yelling at him all the time, have this thing like, we just need to be out of these things. We just need to be out. I can't be bothered, or whatever. Well, in a war, not happening. In a war of aggression, if you can help and you don't, you're on the side of the aggressor morally. If you can help without harming yourself, you must. That's how it works. That's what USAID was largely built on, was the idea that, like, look, we may not want to come in and kill people in there. We may not want to take a side in a civil war, but we can make sure that the refugees, no matter what side they're on, however this shakes out, don't starve to death while this is going on. That's how we do it. That's what it means to, engage in these. And, like Jimmy Swaggart died yesterday. I have sinned against you. Who famously, for those that don't know, was known for doing what Bobcat Goldthwait called naked Chinese fire drills. That he got off on the idea that he would be in a car with a hooker and she'd be naked, and he'd be driving around with a naked woman in the car going, "Ooh, I'm so naughty," right? And she'd get out and run around the car and then get back in and drive. And that was his. Hey, look, if that's what is that what blows your skirt up? Whatever. It's a little lame, but that was what it was. That was I've
never heard that about.
That's how he got busted. That's one of the ways he got busted. Okay. People fucking saw it. People were like, God, "Is that so Jimmy Swaggart?" Yeah. It was performative sexuality because he was so pent up or whatever. Okay. Yeah, that's how it started, right? He did a bunch of other shit, right? Oh. Yeah.
They've always been with us.
The IEEE has approved major grant money for Ukraine from the Institute of Magnetics in Kyiv, approved last week. Yeah, one of the other things, and we'll talk about the deal, what will be part of that kind of rare earth deal that we have. That if we start pulling that back and something happens to Kyiv, that it nullifies that agreement. Yeah. That's for damn sure. Now the idea is, does Trump have an under the table agreement with Vladimir Putin that he'll give us that shit if he takes that land over at a cheaper price? That's the problem with the transactional relationship that Trump has with people.
But also, in addition to that, I've already heard reaction here in Ukraine that, well, if you guys are going to bail, then our promise not to hit Russia's petroleum and natural gas facilities, well, that's off the table now too. So
you back them into a corner.
Get ready for that. Get ready for that gas price to just
no carrot, no stick. Like that's the issue. When it comes to like our control over what Ukraine does, it's all carrot. It really is, because we're not going to join in the bombing of Ukraine. We will allow them to get hit, would be the idea, by not giving them stuff. We would remove the carrots from the circumstance, either financial or weaponry. But there's definitely no stick in this situation. Russia's all stick, and that's more dangerous than a lack of carrots in all these situations. For that, if you could follow me on this analogy. So at a certain point, you back Ukraine into a corner. They're completely within their right as a country that was attacked to do everything they can, even if it's a Hail Mary, against the attacking country. And Europe, the rest of Europe, has not abandoned Ukraine, is giving them the material support, the satellite support, to fire deep into the country at this point, and given them permission to do it.
And hit their petroleum, their processing and and their natural gas. Yeah.
Right.
Additionally, what America is now going to find out about is these people are nuts. Mm-hmm. Ukrainians are nuts. Ukrainians are actually nuts. Mm-hmm. This is the spirit of the Cossack. They will go ballistic. They will sacrifice themselves. There will be deaths on a mass, potentially. Again, going back to what I have spoken to you about before, is that it's not a matter of if we remove our support for them that the war will end. Right. It is a matter of, if we withdraw our support for them, how crazy are these people to let themselves die before they give up their freedom? And that's what the spirit of America is supposed to be about. So what are we going to do? We're just going to sit there and watch this happen? I mean, what if the French had, said, nah, those 13 colonies, screw those guys.
Right.
And that knowledge is actually deeply ingrained, I believe, in the American consciousness.
Right.
So are we really just going to sit and watch a despot, an imperial power destroy what they consider their colony, and just watch these people die? it's
Yeah.
the Ukrainians this argument of like, oh, the West is willing to watch Ukraine fight, or is willing to combat Russia to the last Ukrainian, right? You've heard this narrative, I'm sure.
That's the Marjorie Taylor Greene storyline, right?
Yeah, right. Of like, oh, these poor Ukrainians who will, we're using as a tool against Russia, not taking into consideration that the Ukrainians have agency and they have history, and they are fighting against a country that has screwed with them for frickin' centuries, and they're done being a colony. It happened in 2014. Maidan is actually the moment when it cracked.
Right.
When it was like, oh no, fuck you, we're not a colony anymore. It's the Boston
Tea Party.
Not the Tea Party, but not the Tea Party, but the Boston Massacre. When they shot at the crowd in Boston, and ultimately, I guess it was President Adams who defended these guys. Great documentary. Paul Giamatti, is a great actor. Great actor. Giamatti is a great actor. But anyhow, it cracked in Maidan in 2014, and it was indelible. It was done. We're not going to be a colony anymore. And that spirit is alive and well. It's the same as the 13 colonies. When the division happens, you've crossed a Rubicon. You have gone. That bell cannot be unrung. It is done. The Ukrainians will fight to the very last Ukrainian, not because we are using them as an instrument to strike at Russia, but because they themselves have decided, no, fuck off. This is our country.
Well, and also,
we get to decide.
I would argue
tell
also,
our story.
Right. I would also argue, and this is, I think, a clearer give for people who might, be on the fence about this, or even the Marjorie Taylor Greenes who would take that language and go, that they're just going to go down swinging for a lost cause. That what they're actually fighting for is not just national identity, which is definitely part of it, not just territorial integrity, that which is absolutely part of it, but the freedom of their people. That literally the Russian system that they would seek to impose on everyone else, their legal system, their financial system, the way the country is run, is a form of abject slavery that they would take on these other countries, like they've done in areas of Georgia, like they've done in Chechnya, like they've done in the areas that they control in the Donbass. That it is empirical colonization, of the old order. And when it happens to you, you're done. If you fight back against it, you might as well be in East Germany. I've told the story before, but my uncle snuck newspapers and magazines into East Germany when he was working in the army in West Germany. And at one point, the CIA came to him and said, hey, they know, and the next time you go in, they're going to kill you. And we can't do anything about it. You're going home. Yeah. And they shipped him back to the States. And that is, for the irony.
I didn't know that story, Hal. That's no joke. That's no joke. And they haven't changed.
No. And they're not going to. Like, they have no reason to. As a matter of fact, if they did, their entire system would collapse because it is largely based on this. It is based on that, as a function, in the same way that the modern Chinese system is based on this. It didn't have to be. It really didn't. Like, the Chinese system could run as it does under a relatively normal democratic circumstance. Like, at least the modern China since, say, 1992, 95, right? That time forward up till Xi Jinping took over, there was a window there where you could have actually voted for leaders and almost had a relatively democratic system going on in China, and you would have had the same kind of circumstance. Business would have grown. They would have expanded their train system and their electrical grid. They would have, created more, renewables and all that kind of stuff. But Xi Jinping came in still under the idea that they can't be allowed to make these decisions themselves because they won't. So fuck them. So they had to clamp down on this. And basically, Chinese people in the country may believe that they're different from the Uyghurs who are being rounded up, but they just aren't. They just haven't stepped over the line yet. And the same thing is true about how Russia wants to run everything. There might be people in Russia who think that they're above the line. until they step over that line and find out they aren't. That there's big people and little people, and they ain't it. And Russia wants to export that to Ukraine, the Baltics, all the old territories.
Well, and further, I mean, they ultimately they'd like to see the world run that way.
Yeah,
in the sense that
Ruski
there are
mir.
those with power,
Right.
Well, and in the overall the overall view that you have power, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's all binary. It's and as such, everything is hierarchical. So ultimately, everything leads up to a king.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're arguing about in the United States right now. Again, I go back to the Speed letter.
Mm-hmm.
It's our founding fathers and the idea of America is that kind of system ultimately is self-immolating. It will destroy itself. It will tear itself apart, and there will be more blood, and there will always be more blood,
Right.
because there have to be these autocrats and these kings who must always consume more and grow and grow and grow. That's why Putin, not understanding, and not just Putin, but the ruling class in Russia, and in many ways the ones who influence Russian culture, not now, but throughout history, has always been about, we must always be pursuing more. Because it always has to. There's a I think it's is it Tolstoy who has it is Tolstoy who has a vignette about like the Russian troika, which is a horse-drawn sled through the snow, must be always going forward, faster and faster, always. You're in the darkness in the middle of the night, but you are in this carriage, and it is just plummeting down a road that you don't know what it is, but you must continue to plow down it, because God forbid the Russian state should stop. And that appetite, that avarice, is something that our founding fathers, looking at King George in Britain, said, fuck you, no, we're going to actually govern ourselves, and in so doing, hopefully, try to maintain our appetites. But we have got this section of our country that has always been with us, that shares this desire for consumption and rule and control and dominance, and just let's fuck it all up. Let's kill the Indians. Let's bring in slaves from foreign lands and make them build our country for us. And power and dominance. And that's the important. And then there's this other side of us going, well, actually, that ultimately ends up in the same thing time and time again through history. Right. So let's try something different, and let's try to let our voices be heard and appreciate one another's voices, and make a land where we all have inalienable rights. And again, Russia is anathema to this. And that is what, when
right
the wall came down, one last point, when the wall came down, we thought we were going to go east. They came west, and we're paying for it.
Yeah. The other thing is that right now, in 2025, not the 1800s, not the early 19th century, not before people got notified about the Emancipation Proclamation. Right now, 2025, slavery is legal in Russia. They can grab people off the street, foreigners. They can abduct immigrants, both legal and otherwise, put a rifle in their hand and forcibly make them fight in a war. The ultimate kind of slavery, where you could die doing it directly, not through overwork, not through starvation, not through, but through personal obliteration. It's legal right now. The Russian government does it every fucking day. They trade slaves with the North Koreans, because much like our conversation earlier today about whether once Cassie Ventura tries to leave and is beaten on her way back, everything after that is coercion and violence, no matter what she agreed to up to that point. Once she decided to leave, she is now being forced to do this. Same thing with Patty Hearst. If you're locking somebody in a fucking closet for 56 days and sexually assaulting them, you don't get to say they're there willingly, no matter what you say. The same thing is true in North Korean soldiers. Those people can't move. They don't have the freedom to choose a different country, and if they try, their families will be killed. That's slavery. It's not forced labor. It's not forced conscription. It's not drafting. It's slavery. And the Russians are participating in it right now. They are using slave soldiers and abducting children. So anybody who's like, well, I mean, arguably it's a 6 of one, half dozen of another between them and Ukraine, must defend child abduction and slavery, because that's the difference. There is no situation where the Ukrainians are fighting for their own version of that at all. Not even close. No matter what their history was before,
and so,
no matter... Yeah.
And so what our government has just said is, we're not going to help you to defend against that.
Right. Well, Trump in particular, because again, the Congress said it last year, and we're on a continuing resolution that has an ongoing funding going in there. They are using the discretionary powers, and it's debatable whether they have them or not, mostly to slow roll these things for as long as possible, or they have to take it back and a budget has to pass, and it's tied to a bunch of other defense spending. They would have to rewrite the whole thing or pass it through, and they would lose, by the way, a bunch of people in the House and people in the Senate, I think, for one of the bills that they would have to do to cut the sanction funding and the funding for Ukraine. They would lose that vote. It wouldn't even be a 50-50 where J.D. Vance could save it. They know they don't have the votes to do it. So Trump is just slow walking a lot of this stuff, going, we're not going to give it anymore. Until at some point they go, well, it has to go out the door. So I guess the shipments have to go. They've done this with Kilmar Obrego Garcia and bringing him back to the United States. They blew it off until they couldn't. And it's the slow walking of it that they're hoping gives Putin a toehold. And I got news for you. It's not going to. No. It isn't.
And I don't think the American public is going to like what they're going to see very soon on their screens. We're about to get pummeled, really seriously pummeled, and they're gonna hit everything they can possibly hit, and they're going to be a lot more Ukrainian people getting killed.
Yep, civilian deaths.
Sleep. Yeah, civilian deaths, and it's going to be on us. The Europeans aren't going to stop. If there's there is no upside to this, but if there is an upside, I mean, the Europeans are now going to be like, oh shit. And they're, well, not that they haven't previously, but seeing this coming on the horizon, they knew that oh shit, we got to step up. And they're going to. And lots of, I think, MAGA guys will be like, well, good, we taught them to, we forced them to create their own defense. Yeah, the betrayal won't be forgotten. And we're stronger together than we are apart. And so, yeah, the Europeans are going to step up their military spending, their defense spending. And this war isn't going to stop. It's going to be elongated. A lot more people are going to die. But a lot of Europeans, and in particular Ukrainians, are going to look at America with this decision and go, we remember. We remember the times when you gave us drip, drip, drip during Biden. And then we remember when the orange clown and his Russian supplicants who are in his cabinet said, fuck the Ukrainians. We're going to remember that. Yeah. We're all going to remember that.
Right.
So, okay. All right. A lot of us are going to die.
Yeah.
And I'm not meaningfully being dramatic here, but it is a reality. I could go to sleep one night and a missile could, or some sort of, aftershock from a missile could kill me. I could die for the decision of coming here and standing with the Ukrainian people. And I'm, again, trying not to be dramatic here, but it's a life or death decision. So by definition, there's some drama there.
Mm-hmm.
But fuck it. This is important, man. This is
Mm-hmm.
really, really important. And if Donald Trump and the consumers of Russian propaganda, or the fellow travelers, or the useful idiots, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that is happening in America, where this sympathy and this desire for, to help Moscow, wherever that originates from, you made your bed, you lie in it. The rest of us, we're going to fight against the fascism in Moscow. And that's why I'm here. And it's not. And look, I got a shameless plug. This week on The Edge, we got Alexander Mereshko. Alexander is the head of the Foreign Relations Committee in the parliament here, the Rada. A really hard guy to pin down for an interview, because he's either constantly traveling or he's talking to foreign dignitaries who are coming here. So we spoke to him on Monday, and some of it is now dated because of this decision, but it's still relevant. And we talk at great length about, Ukrainian foreign relations, whether it's with America or with Europe or with the global South or, the Far East. It's a good one. We're still in the process of editing it, but, the point is still well worth making, that, this country is sovereign. It's not going to give up. And so the only thing that America has done with this decision by the executive to stop providing arms is to decide to watch a lot of people die, and they're not going to forget about it.
Nope. There are also, I would argue, all of us that voted for Harris and voted for Biden and wish they had even gone further in this process know that there is this would have been held to a different standard had they been elected, and I stand by that. And so there is a large group of Americans, a statistically insignificant difference between the two, that half of this country stood up and voted to continue helping Ukraine. And that group of people is still, I think, rock solid on it. And there's a group of Republicans, whether, my opinion about Lindsey Graham remains unchanged as far as what a cretin he is. But there is one area where the enemy of my enemy is my friend in this regard, and he seems staunchly pro-Ukrainian and anti-Russian, and there's a bunch of people, that side with him in this particular instance. The difference will be, well, lip service doesn't fucking matter if they can't, when they've got control of the House or the Senate, whether they can turn that into anything and turn Trump around. Here's what I think, and this is, this goes into who Trump owes what, and whether there's compromise on him and of what sort, is that I personally believe that the kind of showboat attack on Tehran's nuclear system and stopping at that point in an attempt, in many ways, not so much to stop the war, but to stop Israel from continuing to bomb the country, because, going, oh, okay, well, once we've hit these big sites, you guys have no excuse to continue hitting their airplanes and their missile systems and that kind of stuff, because we'll call it a draw. The reason that it benefits Trump to get them to do that is because those missile systems and those airplanes are supplied by Russia. That they are, and Russia doesn't have any more to give them. And and the same thing is they require Shahed drones from Iran. So if Iran has to start making up for its lack of aircraft with Shahed drones, those are drones they won't be selling to Russia to attack Ukraine. So this is less about Trump setting back Iran's nuclear ambitions and more about doing Vladimir Putin yet another solid.
Well, I mean, yeah. He is compromised.
Right.
He is absolutely 100% compromised in one way, shape, or form. And the Iran issue, of course, is, draws in a whole bunch of other. We get pummeled by Shahed drones, either created in Iran or in their proxy, factories where they build a a version of the Shahid. I mean, and by the way, also not to gloss over the fact that the Ukrainians actually have just hit a major producer of drones. They're not, so again, the Ukrainians aren't going to stop. But the whole mixture of Iran and North Korea, and I mean, North Korea is supposedly sending another 30,000 troops or something like that.
Well, did you see?
We're on the wrong side of this, man. We're on the wrong side of this.
Did you see the footage of Kim Jong Un crying over the coffins of the returning soldiers? This was apparently a big deal for him. It showed weakness in a way that he's never done before. But apparently, they played this video of him for this crowd of him greeting these things in the way. This is something that never fucking happens. And he was seeing these directly and making the point that Moscow owes us was kind of how they did this, why they did it. But this is from the New York Times. It was unlike any other. It was a sight unlike any most North Koreans had probably ever seen. Their nation's leader, Kim Jong Un, looking somber and leaning over a coffin draped in their flag. The moment, as shown on state television, showed the remembrance of troops killed in Russia's war against Ukraine, a conflict in which Mr. Kim tried to parlay their sacrifices into expanding military ties with Moscow. The problem is that will they be worth a fuck? He's been trying to move away from China and towards Moscow, but and again, people like please, crocodile tears. I completely agree. I think the man's a sociopath, but even the performance is meaningful in the context of of how North Korea operates. Right? This is a huge deal. Apparently, let's see if I can find it. There was people were crying obviously in the audience, but they cry whenever he walks in the fucking room. But the the backdrop images. The decisive moment has finally come. Read the handwritten message where those let us bravely fight this sacred battle with boundless love and trust bestowed upon us by our beloved supreme commander. It read as they send these people, as they bury these fuckers who died for Vladimir Putin to try and, basically get gas rights off of Crimea. Jesus.
And for nothing.
There were Russian delegates there.
Maybe a meter of ground.
Yeah. There were Russian delegates there that were allegedly crying as well. Maybe they were just sent there to performatively weep as well, mainly because they're in deep shit. So that was a pretty big deal. And then along with that, there was this article. This is from the Kyiv Independent, but it's not the only place I've seen it. Is this Russian alliance wavers as Tehran suffers major blows and it's mainly because it's very transactional. That they had a 20-year security agreement that ended beginning of this year or late last year, and they kind of did a handshake version of a new one earlier this year to kind of pick up the slack. But there's no more teeth to it than there were, before then. Right?
Yeah. Do you think Iran is going to be buying any more Russian air defense systems?
It's considering they didn't work against any of these. You're right, because they were ineffective against the Israeli strikes entirely. Here's the
and also, is Russia going to be able to produce anymore?
Right, and were the ones they produced worth a fuck? Right? Yeah. That's the other thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Holy shit. Also, by the way, Karen Ames is asking, why didn't they let Ukraine join NATO? Okay. The easiest reason, and I'm sure there's a lot to unpack in this, but there was a lot of tiptoeing around Russia when they were trying to join the rest of the world. And there was this we don't want to push things any further than they've already gone and yada, yada, yada. I would argue that the simplest reason is because the Ukraine of today was not the Ukraine of yesterday. And the people that ran the place at that time were much closer to Russia. And by letting them join NATO, it was almost viewed like allowing a spy matrix to join. So, right?
Well, and also, I mean, to be fair, and perfectly, let's not put on rose-colored glasses. Ukraine has a lot of work to do when it comes to corruption and things like that. And
because of Russia
and
controlling it and sock puppeting it. Right.
Yeah. So again, who asked the question?
It was Karen Ames. Karen, yeah.
Karen, we addressed that on this week's episode of On the Edge.
Look at that.
I encourage you to tune in.
You guys are working in cahoots. You and Karen are I want to bring up something else, and because I don't know why it isn't brought up more to shut down these things, and I think I'm like the only person who brings it up. Is the 1997 Founding Act between NATO and Russia?
Yes.
That this more than any other thing the whole like we're not going to move 15 inches. The USSR agreement in the 80s, whatever the conversation that was we promised we wouldn't move any further. Well, first of all, NATO expansion was a response.
What are we done with this? I know where you're going with this. Please continue, but point of order. So
yes,
go ahead.
NATO expansion was a voluntary response to Russian expansion under CSTO and the reclaiming of territory, namely Chechnya, Georgia, and its first attempts at Ukraine. Even the newest attacks on Ukraine have caused more NATO countries to join because of it. The NATO expansion is in response to Russian aggression. Has been every single time. But every time they talk about NATO growing and the number of people joining, they always leave off the fact that weeks, months, even a year before, Russia had attacked somebody else or seized territory. They always leave that shit out. But what I want to point out more than anything else is beyond the whole 15, we're not going to move 15 inches past here, and we're no expansion east, blah, 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 which was about East and West Berlin. It was about East and West Germany. It wasn't about, and it was an agreement with the USSR, which doesn't exist anymore. A country that no longer exists. You can't have a treaty with a country that doesn't exist anymore. So shut the fuck up and start from scratch. And they did. They started from scratch. And they sat down and they did all the hard work. And NATO and Russia sat down for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they came up with the Founding Act on Mutual Relationships, Cooperation, and Security between NATO and the Russian Federation, signed in Paris, France in 1997 on the 27th of May. So the primary part of this, besides all the principles that are therein, one of them was around the acknowledgement of the vital role of democracy and political pluralism and the rule of law and the respect for rights. Obviously, stuff Russia was snickering during the entire time, but also refraining from the threat or use of force against each other as well as against any other state, its sovereignty or territorial integrity or political independence in any manner inconsistent with the United Nations Charter, with the Declaration of Principles guiding relationships between the participating states contained in the Helsinki Final Act, which would include the ability of anybody, and this is the big one, here it is, ladies and gentlemen, the NATO expansion folks, get ready to get fucked in the ear. Respect for sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all states and their inherent right to choose the means to ensure their own security. That means if you want to join NATO, you're allowed to join NATO. If you don't want to join NATO, you don't have to. And NATO lived up to that. Russia did not. Fuck off. That agreement between NATO and Russia allowed for Ukraine, if they so choose, at any time in the future, or any of the Baltic states or anybody else, to join NATO if they so choose. They mutually recognized the right of sovereign states, and this included, for these discussions, Ukraine, which existed with the borders it had in 1991, their right to join NATO. Period. End of story. No bitching, no nothing. If they wanted to join, they could, because we don't have to worry about it. We're not going to attack anybody. Fuck it. If they want to join, it'd just be a waste of their money. They could just throw 2.5% of their GDP, because we're never going to attack them. They don't have to worry about it. But if they want to join, they can. That's what that agreement says. Fuck off. They signed it. It was a signed treaty between NATO and Russia. Period.
Right. This is my point of order. This is my point of order as someone who has spent a large part of my life going to treaty negotiations and foreign minister meetings and all that. The cornerstone of this whole we promised we weren't going to go east. Much of it is based on this supposed conversation between Baker,
right,
Secretary of State Baker, and Gorbachev. And even Gorbachev himself said, that really wasn't the conversation.
Yeah.
But regardless of the entire thing, is this what bothers me about these guys who make this argument is that they misunderstand, they do not accept a cornerstone of everything that is done on the global stage. I don't give a flying fuck what was said in a bilateral meeting. I don't care what somebody says to somebody else until there is ink on paper and signatures at the bottom of a document. It don't mean shit.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Right.
That's how it works. And what Russia is currently doing is saying the same thing that got them kicked out of the G8, making it the G7, was that all this ink on paper and these signatures, they don't really mean shit, right?
Right.
We all accept that, right? We all know that power at the instrument of power is the way that the world works, right? And the G7 said, go fuck yourself. Get out of here. And it's the same thing with this kind of shit, with the 1997, 1994, everything. What matters, what has to matter, what must matter is the rule of law. And we break the rule of law globally. We do in the United States, and the West does repeatedly. We should be held to account for that. But the argument that Moscow provides is not that, hey, if you break that rule of order, a rule of law, it means that, fuck it, the whole thing goes out. You know, that can't be the way that the world works, and that is what the Ukrainians are fighting for.
Right.
Las Vegas.
Ink on paper,
88.
and rule.
Hold on. Go ahead. Sorry.
Your AI is getting in there. Did I say something?
No, yeah.
Look, the point is that if you are going to live in a rules-based order, which I believe is a better way of doing things than might makes right, then this fight is essential for that perception of how things should run. And so if we're going to abandon these people, they're not going to give up that fight because they understand that the alternative is this kind of might makes right way of life, that like we can fuck you up. I mean, look what the Russians do in the occupied territories.
Right.
I mean, like you suck it. You do what we tell you to do because we have power. We are the representatives of Moscow. And as such, the petty little, aggressive men that we are, or people, not just men, but, generally there's a lot of toxic, masculinity bullshit that comes from Moscow.
Sure.
Women aren't really big on the elephant kind of mentality. And if you don't know what I mean by the elephant, go check some of John Sweeney's work.
Who has the longest trunk? Right.
No, it's a torture technique.
I'm kidding.
No, the whole thing is awful, and that is why Ukraine is rejecting it. And so, for us to abandon them, and this is the problem with Trump, is that it puts forward the perception.
One of the problems, sure, yes.
One of the problems. It puts us in the camp of those guys who reject what our founding fathers thought, which was that we should give inalienable right. There should be inalienable rights and a participation by the population into their governance. These guys believe in a system where it's might makes right, and if you are in power, you are there because you deserve to be in power, and the abuse of said power is actually, it's not even conceptually abuse. It's just the use of power is I'm bigger than you, you're smaller than me, fuck you.
Right.
And our founding fathers said no, that we'd rather, and again to reiterate, ultimately, while it's messy and while it can be perceived as weak because of its discord and its chaos that ultimately, in the longer run, it's better because these guys, these despots like Putin or Xi or the Ayatollahs or, take your pick, the autocracies. What happens is it gets to a point where there's violent revolution. And that is far, and also long periods of domination and kind of like suppression of the will of the people, because there isn't this way of negotiating between ourselves. And that's what we're fighting for here in Ukraine. And I'm sorry to go on another diatribe. You know me when I get on my soapbox, but this is why we're fighting. This is why I'm here. I'm here because in 2014, I saw people overthrow an imperial master. And I saw the essence of what I believe our country was born out of. The same kind of idea of we can govern ourselves. We don't have to be dominated by a centralized power. That's why we chafe, and we always have, and probably always will be really like have a lot of bile for Washington, because we're revolutionaries and we're fiercely independent. But that idea is born out of a place where people had lived for centuries under might makes right. And we rejected it. And the Ukrainians are doing the same goddamn thing. So we have just abandoned them by saying we're not going to give you the tools and the weapons to defend yourself, to fight for these ideals. But they're not going to stop fighting for those ideals because it's essential to it's like the air they breathe. Or the water you drink, or the food.
Well, and I think that's true.
We've crossed that bridge.
Trump wants credit for the NATO forces, NATO countries moving from 2.5% of GDP to 5% of GDP, when in reality he to some degree is responsible for them it is responsible for them doing that, not because he motivated them to care more about it, but because they have to make up for the slack created by Trump's dragging America away. And they will have to do that. And they may even view it as temporary until a Democrat gets in or the political winds shift. But in the interim, that's why they're doing it. They're not doing it because he's renewed their patriotic fervor for NATO as an organization. They're doing it because if they don't, Russia will use this gap as an attack point on a bunch of fronts, and not just Russia, but their proxies as well. The other thing too is that, meanwhile, I think Trump wants to give Putin a chance to tap out or escape or cut his losses or gain whatever ground. And he thinks that's where this deal is coming from. He's like, that's why he keeps saying, I really think he wants this to end. He's never shown any sign that he wants it to end. It's just fucking ridiculous. But that's where Trump is going with this, because I think he knows the reports he's getting, whether he likes it or not, is that Russia is getting its ass handed to it. Even without our arms, through drones and the intelligence of the Ukrainian people and the European backing that it's got, that Russia's going to need a long-term ceasefire and a rebuilding period to not end up on the downside of this, no matter what happens. And somebody, Billy in the chat saying he doesn't read the reports. I agree. These are the people yapping at him. That's why you hear half-truths and chunks of information from him, because he's hearing these conversations around him and he's dozing off during parts of it. He doesn't really care. But the point is, what does perk his ears up, when he does actually care about, is giving Putin an exit strategy so that Putin owes him, and gives him that financial leverage.
And let us not forget that our body politic has been deeply infiltrated by the Russians.
Yep.
He is hearing these voices in his ears because he has enabled, or those around him have enabled, or he has gone into common cause with the Christian nationalists or what have you, who get funding from the Russians, that they're deeply in our body politic. The Russians are they speak to Tulsi Gabbard. That's just RT. That's just the information warfare.
That's just
sphere.
the surface level of it, right?
that's the surface level. There's tangible money being exchanged, or people falling out of windows. You know, I mean, this is all the same thing. The Russians are fighting a hybrid war against us that we have not only have we not recognized, but we are losing badly, and we've got to get our shit together. We really do, and it's all part of it. But the eye of the storm is Ukraine, because Ukraine is the center is the cornerstone of Russia's sense of identity and itself being an empire. So do not think that the decision made to, like, we're not going to supply 155 shells to Ukraine or no more Patriots, that is done in a vacuum. We are in a, I don't like when people say we're in World War III, because we're not. We're in a conflict that the world has not seen before, and it is hybrid, and there are casualties and people are dying, particularly here. But this fight is global. We're already in a global fight. Again, I don't like the term World War III because it's a different kind of thing, but make no mistake about it. We are in, currently, all of us, as citizens of the United States and as nations, citizens of a nation state involved in this, all of us are involved in a conflict that's happening right now, and it will change the fate. It will change the future. It will change the fate of humanity. And if we do not support Ukraine, or God forbid, even actually contribute to Ukraine's defeat, whatever that will be, then we're going down one way. If we support Ukraine in its success and its minimalizing of an autocratic, aggressive fascist state in Moscow, which is part and parcel and in partnership with other autocratic fascist states, then we go down that road. So we have skin in the game, people. We have skin in the game. So, you know, make your
NATO,
tell your
NATO
friends,
forces,
write your Congress. Yeah.
NATO forces had to scramble to jets because of Russian drones going into NATO territory, mainly because of how slapdash and shitty they operate. They're giving Russia the benefit of the doubt that this isn't a scare tactic, that they just suck, which is entirely possible. In the meantime, you've got like Russia's issues with Azerbaijan, which are increasing. There's increasing separation there.
Georgia.
Georgia.
People are on the streets of Tbilisi every single night. Tens of thousands usually protesting against Moscow's imperialism.
And at some point, if the pressure was taken off, if Russia wasn't fighting in Ukraine the way they are, they would the attacks on civilians in those other countries would be ratcheted up to an even higher level. That you'd see slaughter in a bunch of different countries that Russia has control over, Azerbaijan and Georgia and Chechnya and places like that, as they try to rise up against this. It is only the distraction of the Ukraine war that keeps them from being more violent with these people. And again, for all this, like, they're all, I think, was it Tucker Carlson said, like, Iran is aligned with the BRICS countries, and therefore, which represent more geography and money than the G7 and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but not together, and they're completely disorganized. And is that what you fucking want? You want your economic future to be based on crypto used for sex slavery and human trafficking and violence? Or do you want to at least move towards people having a say in their government, however spotty that can be at times, period. And I gotta say, as shitty as it is, it's always better than the alternative. And that's we gotta lock it. Then maybe people will treat it seriously instead of just going, well, it kind of all sucks. That makes everybody take their hand off the wheel, and the Putins of the world are waiting to jump in there.
Do I have to say it again? What do I say, Hal?
The Lincoln quote?
The 1855 speed letter. Look it up, people. They've always been with us.
That's right.
The mentality within the United States and the mentality within Russia and within autocracies and kingdoms and power, dictatorships. That's the default position.
Yeah.
What the experiment that we are trying in the West and in America in particular is to try and break away from that.
Yes. And it's new.
It's God damn it. It's that speed letter. It's always the speed letter for me. It's my North Star. It's if the know nothings, if the MAGA types, if the KKK, if the Confederacy, if the nativists, whatever the hell you want to call them, if they're the ones that take power in the United States, then we're no better than what we're trying to break away from. And as such, I would rather immigrate to Russia, where they don't even pretend to love democracy and liberty. It's so simple. And that's the fight that we're engaged in right now. This is one of those moments in U.S. and world history where it is definitive. We have to pick a lane. And the lane I choose to pick is liberty. And I will stand with the people of Ukraine because that's what they're fighting for. And I'll do it to the detriment of my own well-being, my own health, and if God forbid it comes to it, my own life. Because this fucking matters.
Right. Absolutely.
Done.
Yeah. Thanks. We love you.
God bless you, Al.
And when you too, man.
Thank you for giving me a platform and a choice to and a chance to get my voice heard and watch On the Edge, people, and listen to colleagues of mine who are here as well. This really matters. Ukraine matters, and the decision by the executive to remove support from this country is a decision that gives power and support to the people who have everything against what we are supposed to believe in and what our Constitution and our founding fathers put us on a path for.
Yes, appreciate it, Phil. People are asking also, where does an individual gift to you help the most? Who, where? I think they mean either to you or to to support Ukraine or those kind of things. We've talked about some of the charities before as well, but
well, there's I'm a big proponent of the Ukrainian Children's Action Project. I have a Patreon. I have not thought about personal benefit from this, but I'd like to keep the lights on. So there are outlets out there. It's not hard to find, but more than anything else, not for me, but for our own future. For the own future, for the future of America, Western liberal democracy, for the future of Ukraine, more importantly than anything else, is to push back against this bullshit that is happening in the executive, to push back against those who would have us abandon Ukraine. So as a citizen, contact your representative. As a citizen, that there are, the most important thing is just believe. You have to understand what's at stake here, and you have to stand up.
You can't shrug it off.
Do this on a daily basis. No, we all of us have a responsibility, and you do this on a daily basis, Hal. And we're very appreciative, and all of us who are in this fight together, whether it's you or any other
Brian, absolutely, Boston Brian.
Back.
Yep.
Brian, Midas Touch, Texas Paul. I don't want Stephanie, of course. Like Malcolm. Kaylin Robertson. We're not unified because we're a bunch. We're a pretty a group of people with disparate group. But the most important thing is to recognize that this is important and act accordingly. Every day, every way, everything that you do, recognize that our democracy is at stake, and it's centered here. This is the eye of the storm, but every single one of us has skin in the game. And so act accordingly. They're trying to take away our democracy. And that's what Russia and Moscow have done. And that's been their center of gravity for centuries. And we can't bow to it. Much as we didn't bow to the Nazis, much as we didn't bow to the Soviet Union, but anybody who wants to push back against the foundations of our American experiment and this Western liberal democracy, resist. Always resist.
Agreed. Thank you, brother.
I've gone,
Be safe.
gone way over.
Yeah, it's
I
okay.
love you, pal.
Love you too.
Hey, safe or not safe? Not to be dramatic, but if this is a cause if there is a cause worth dying for, it's this one. So anything that happens to me, I made my choice. I'm here for a reason. I know what I'm doing. I'm a damn grown adult. I made my decision. I know what I'm standing for.
Right on. All right. Well,
all right.
We
wish
for the things. Hopefully, we will one day enjoy the Philip Bittner travel show. Nope, I know that. Yeah. I'm not saying you are.
No, I want to go. I want to go when this is all said and done. I want to go sip wine in Napa with my buddy, or twiddle my toes in one of the Great Lakes.
We'll all send you on vacation. We're going to do a Kickstarter to send you on vacation when this is all over. But this is also why, since the very beginning of this war, I have committed to making this a regular part of my show twice a week since it began. Yep. Even before you came on, and as you came on, it became intrinsic to this because it matters, and we got to keep this in the forefront of people's minds. So appreciate you, brother. Be safe as much as you can.
And you.
Take every precaution, and we appreciate you. All right.
Okay, on Saturday. Watch this Sunday. Okay.
Will do.
Take care, guys.
All right. Be well. There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Philip Bittner, and I got to say, it is not dramatic at all what he is saying. It's a scary notion, but this is very real. And it is also why you guys know I don't mince words about life and death shit. I don't shrug it off. You make adult decisions about these kind of things. It matters. And anybody who, uses like broad generalization shrug phrases to say, well, it doesn't matter anyways because this is going to happen or that, is acting on behalf of Russia, whether they mean to or not, is acting on behalf of the aggressor in that situation. It's like if you were talking about, sexual assault and your phrase was, well, women are crazy, so what can you do, right? It's the same thing, morally. If you can do something and you don't, that's a decision. And especially in the case of an aggressor acting on somebody else. And so what you will see from me here, and what I will push for everywhere I go, is that kind of moral clarity around these kind of things. 214, yes. 212, no. I think that, well, let's see how close they get. Are they still voting? We're going to find out at the last second. Just how cowardly these guys are. Is this the rule is this to pass it or the rule to try and pass it? Oh my God, shut up. House will consider the Senate passed GOP text. Skip ad. Okay, here we go. Fox of North Carolina amendment on agreeing to the amendment. Okay, so these are still amendment process.
Being voted on now to enable Speaker Johnson, if needed, to be able to delay or reschedule voting and preventing Democrats from using certain tactics to stall. The Senate spent the weekend working on and passing its own version of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. The House now taking up those changes, starting first with agreeing on the rule for debate. President Trump's deadline to receive the legislation is this Friday, the 4th of July. A number of House Republicans are strongly opposed because of the measure's impact on the deficit, as The Hill reports. So they too may be standing in the way of the measure moving forward. After this, a vote expected on the debate rule itself. While members vote will show more of the floor debate on the rule.
Okay. So, yeah, this is the current state of it. They're still voting on being able to vote on it. And that's going to happen kind of all day. And you'll see a lot of very close votes on moving it forward. And ultimately, the reason you'll see that is because the people that are voting against it feel stronger about voting against it, in theory. The fact that it's officially called a Big Beautiful Bill is, it's fucking embarrassing. I think so too, Surrender Monkey. I try to make everybody feel a little bit better. So enjoy yourselves, if you know what I'm talking about, and I will see you later on this afternoon for House Sparks Mega Worldwide. Like, subscribe, share the show, etc. I'm sorry, and by the way, I know we got some super chats during the show, and I was so busy talking to Phil, and it got so serious that I didn't get a chance to see them. So I just want you guys to know I appreciate it and thank you, even if I didn't see them directly. You guys are awesome, and I can't tell you how much it means to me. Like, especially when I'm like walking around during the day and somebody sees a video and they send a Venmo or something and it pops up on my watch, and I'm like, I got like Summer will tell you that I've often been brought to it brings a tear to my eye because it's so sweet that people care and see the show and that it's reaching people. It's another way I know that it's reaching people and that it's mattering. So. Just saying that you guys are wonderful. That's all I'm going to say. God damn it. And until next time. Don't be scared. Don't comply in advance. And if they pass this thing, we'll still keep fighting it. We'll make the changes. We'll protect people. One big evil takes 1,000 small acts of good, and that's what we'll do. All right, hit that like, share the show, everybody. See you soon.
And vests and thongs. Woo, I love that feeling. Zipper hoods have got the goods. Owie, owie, ow. Boing, boing, doobie-doo. You know what I wanna do. Hey, boing, boing, doobie-doo. You know what I wanna do. What's up?